What's up guys, welcome to today's episode. We're going to be doing a Q&A on my prep for the Ironman 70.3 that's going to be happening in the Philippines on March the 2nd. Had quite a few questions that have come in on social media through the polls, so I'm going to be answering those for you guys today. So let's get stuck right in. Now, when it comes to the Ironman, of course, there are those three disciplines, but I believe that for you to be a fully conditioned athlete, you do need to be, obviously focusing on other modalities such as strength training, resistance training, and of course, things like stretching, mobility work. I do a lot of yoga. When it comes to doing 2 swims, 2 cycles, and 2 runs per week, of course, they need to be spaced out. The schedule would look like doing my weight training on its own. So let's say I do 3 weight training sessions a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On the days in between, I would do 1 swim and 1 cycle. Maybe then on the second active recovery day, I would maybe look at doing 1 cycle, 1 run, and then on the weekend choose 2 of those modalities out of the 3 and then double up on that again. Generally, I like to focus on running because that's going to be the one part of the race that I'm going to need to spend a lot of time, effort, and energy in. It is the last leg of the race. So I do try and make myself the most conditioned athlete as possible when it comes to the running side of things. Of course, with the swimming, we do want to focus on a good pace, good recoveries, but that generally, when it comes to race day, is in the beginning of the race time. It's where I have the most amount of energy. So I'm never really too concerned about the swim. It goes by relatively fast. The cycle is, I think, maybe my second modality that I like to focus on. I do it in that sense where it's weight training, then my endurance work, weight training, endurance work, weight training, and endurance work. And on my weight training days, I normally shift those to the evening once I've had breakfast, once I've had lunch, so that I am nice and fueled up and ready to go and actually give 110% in my weight training sessions. And then on those days as well, the Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I do a 45 minutes to 1 hour yoga session in the morning as well, which is fairly low intensity in comparison to the weight training that's coming in the evening. And then of course we do have 1 to 2 active recovery days depending on how I schedule things week to week. But yeah, that's how I schedule my Ironman prep training. Exactly that, right. I take time off during season. Of course, I do minimize the amount of stress that I put on the body. I don't think it's sustainable for me to be, running 80, 100K weeks. I know that there's a lot of people out there that go and do it, and great for them. But of course, my biggest passion is either doing weight training or it is doing yoga. So those are the things that I actually prioritize off season, right? Build more strength, build more muscle. I think that's always going to help when it comes to any endurance or aerobic work. The more muscle you have, this is going to optimize your performance. So that's the first thing that I focus on outside of season. But of course, doing mobility work, stretching work in the form of yoga, in the form of Pilates, is also really going to help keep me flexible, keep me mobile. It's going to make sure that I can also, focus on my breathing. Yoga is massive on helping you have much better breathing, and I think much better practice in self-control, right? That's also a massive one when it comes to doing something like an Ironman, right? Is that you really need to be centered in that. You need to really, if the heart rate is elevated and you're struggling to breathe, you need to be able to come back to center, and yoga helps a lot with that. So those are the 2 things that I really focus on outside of racing season. But of course, I do still swim, do cycle, do run. I don't believe in giving up the modalities, but instead of 3 times per week, twice per week, I cut down to once per week, right? So I keep my 3 weight training sessions, I keep my 3 yoga sessions, but then of course, just 1 swim, 1 cycle, 1 run. And if there is, of course, any more energy, if I do feel like, whoa, actually, you know what? Whoop is telling me I'm ready to go and train, there's more energy in the tank, there's more fuel, let's go. Then I might get in a small run, maybe 5K on top of, let's say, the standard 10 to 15Ks that I am running per week. And when it comes to cycling and running, of course, then maybe I might just do 20 to 30 minutes of cycling after my weight training workout. So a massive deload that does really, really help. I don't believe in my recovery necessarily needing to involve eating in a surplus, right? So my nutrition stays at a maintenance level. And obviously focusing on calories out, calories in, just making sure I am replenishing what I'm burning out of season. but you know, there is no loading, formal loading out of season. So yeah, just cutting down on the training, or at least cutting down on the intensity of that. You know, avoiding the problem and not waiting for it before you try and fix it, right? So getting the glycogen into the system before you become depleted, at the same time getting the salts in before you start cramping, right? So you always want to be forward thinking when it comes to your nutrition in regards to your training. That's a really, really big one, right? So just making sure that you are getting in those carbohydrates every, 20 to 30 minutes, even if you don't feel like you need it. Right? Be forward thinking, right? What if you do start cramping in half an hour? Once you start cramping, it's game over. You're gonna struggle. You're gonna have a very, very difficult time. So it's rather better to just be safe than sorry, load the system even if you don't feel that you need it, but be careful about not loading in terms of volume, right? So, I normally will not, if let's say I have a 4-hour cycle, for the first hour and a half, I'm not gonna be bringing in any salts, I'm not gonna be bringing in any glucose into the system, right? We're going to obviously utilize what's stored in the body. Only after that, then do I do my strategy of every 20 to 30 minutes, getting in small amounts of carbohydrates, and then I would say once every half an hour to 45 minutes bringing in some more salt. In terms of strategy number 2 would then also just be making sure that you are loading the night before, right? So you don't want to be going for things like your pizzas and your pastas, but if you are going to be glycogen loading, you want to make sure that you're getting in a variety. So I like to do dried fruits. Those are a massive one because once again, we are avoiding volume, right? You don't want to be having high amounts of volume, carbohydrate volume the night before, and then you've not digested that come race time or come, exercise time, right? So you do want to make sure that you're not sitting with, bloat, high amounts of water retention because maybe the carbohydrate that you consumed absorbs a lot of water, so now you're feeling a lot heavier. Your performance is not going to be where it's at. You want to feel lean, you want to feel like you're able to digest that food relatively in a small amount of time. Would just be to have a good loading session the night before and maybe in the morning, but of low volume food. I would say those are the 2 most important things to just consider when it comes to fueling correctly for really, really intense sessions. Is fail to plan to fail, and of course prevention is better than cure. When I say Ironman, firstly, I do want to highlight that I love doing 70.3s, which is the half Ironman, right? I never want to say Ironman and then everyone's like, no, but you do 70.3s. I prefer the half distance. It's, short and fast, and it's really just, in line with my style and my preferred way of training. What inspired me to do an Ironman? I would say it's a bit of a mix. I come from a bodybuilding background, right? So, that was my way of, validating my performance and my return on all the time in the gym that I was spending, hours on hours. Was then, showing that on stage, showing that through bodybuilding, having this aesthetic physique. But after a couple of years of doing that, after I would say a decade long of spending, 3 hours a day almost in the gym, I started to lose that motivation and that drive to keep showing up because it became so monotonous and so repetitive. And so I needed a new goal. Now, the goal wasn't just all of a sudden go and do the Ironman. My goal was to do a half marathon. So it was a 21 kilometer. I did that. I actually ended up doing that on like a Sunday afternoon in Portugal. I went for a 10K run and ended up doing 21. And after doing that, I realized, okay, there's actually more in the bag. There's more in store for me. So I then focused on doing a full marathon, and that was the Lisbon Marathon in Portugal. And when I arrived in the morning at like 5:36 in the morning, I saw the big red M. Now the Ironman was going to be happening a week after the Lisbon Marathon, so they were setting up and all the infrastructure was there, and I saw this big red M, and I said to myself, the next time that I am going to be in Cascais, Portugal, will be to do an Ironman. And so that kind of set off this whole chain of prep for the next year. And then I did my first half Ironman in Andorra, which is in the Pyrenees Mountains, and it was such an incredible race. And that really just for me just triggered this inherent part of, holy shit, like there's something that I've never done that I'm falling in love with every single day during the prep work. So yeah, the first Ironman really just triggered me to wanting to do more. And the most recent one was obviously in Thailand, the Bang San 70.3, which is incredible. And now we're off to go and do the first Ironman 70.3 in the Philippines, which I'm very, very excited about. I'm not big on gels. I've never been big on gels. I don't actually think I've ever brought a gel into any race that I've done, which is super strange. I know that the pros are doing it. I know a lot of people that I compete with love gels. They obviously understand the importance of it. It's an easy way to be getting in nutrients, your sodium, obviously, potassium, your electrolytes. I much prefer to carry fruit with me. I love raisins. There's obviously a lot of fruit on cycling leg. There's obviously a lot of fruit on the running leg. I think let's just break up obviously the swim. You don't need any food, right? You don't need any snacks for that, because you're obviously going into that the most energized. You would have carved up the night before, maybe had a carb meal before the race. Now, I think even for the first hour to 2 hours of the cycle, I don't really feel like you need much food either. There's still a high amount of glycogen in the system from your loading. But obviously once you now start to become a little bit more depleted, you are burning these calories, you are dispelling a lot of electrolytes and a lot of sodium, etc. You do need to replenish a lot of these things, right? So for me, I like to just take sodium tablets, right, for my salt. I think that is one of the supplements that I do keep on me throughout the entire race, whether it's the cycle or the run. When it comes to the glycogen replenishment, right, getting the sugar in, getting in the fuel, I do like to have fresh fruit, so I carry a lot of raisins. I love bananas. Oranges are really good. Anything that's easy to digest, that's not super high in volume, right? I don't think anyone really likes that feeling of being like, oh my gosh, like I'm drinking so much water to stay hydrated and I'm having something that's retaining this water. You feel really heavy, you feel uncomfortable. So anything that is low volume, high calorie, dried fruits, apricots are great. So these are my go-to snacks throughout, right? So I can at least get in, let's say, 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates every 20 minutes throughout a race. And if you're looking at that being, let's say, 80 to 100 grams in volume that you're doing, hourly, probably about 300 grams every single hour, at the end of like a 6 hour 70.3, you're going to have eaten like a solid kilo, maybe even more in terms of volume. The lower volume that we can keep it with the higher calorie, attached to that, so more amounts of glucose per small unit, that would be great. Apricots, raisins, dates are fantastic as well. And I do normally go for about 20 to 30 grams every 20 to 30 minutes throughout the race. So just starting off on injuries, depending on how severe the injury is, I've only actually ever fractured my 5th metatarsal, which then obviously stopped me from competing in the most recent Ironman, half Ironman that I wanted to do, which was also actually in the Philippines. This is a bit of a full circle right now because I'm standing here injury-free and going to be competing in the same race, which I'm very excited about. So I think just depending on, the injury, especially when it comes to the injuries that I've experienced, have only been, foot related. There's always so much more work that can be done when it comes to upper body, mobility work, stretching work, flexibility. Conditioning can still be done in so many different forms, but throwing in the towel and saying, my foot's fucked, I'm not able to do anything, is just really the wrong mindset. So I think if your head is in the game and you really are still committed, there's so many different modalities that you can train, especially when it comes to yoga, Pilates, weight training, right? We can still do a whole bunch of upper body. You can pretty much work everything up until, let's say, the feet if you have a foot injury like I did. So that would be just my number one on injuries, is that, don't give up, keep moving forward. Of course, if it's, let's say, a break or a tear, and the competition is relatively close by, I would just obviously be real and consider not throwing in the towel, but maybe it's just not a wise choice to train on top of an injury. That's never a good idea. In terms of fatigue, I burnt out really badly because I did not know what I was doing in the beginning, right? I was training twice a day. I was consuming a lower amount of food to try and lose this weight, to get faster, which only led to higher amounts of fatigue because I was not replenishing all these calories that I was burning, right? So I think that's another really, really important point, is to just make sure that you are getting in the right amount of food and the right amount of fuel to optimize your recovery and your performance, right? So that you can minimize the amount of fatigue that the body is under. And when it comes to, I think, point number 3 of missed training sessions, I have a golden rule that I will never let it go past 2 days. right? So if I miss a training session today, fine. If I miss a training session tomorrow, cool, life gets in the way. But golden rule is that 2-day rule of never let it go by 2 days, right? The second it becomes 2 days, it can become 3 days, 3 days becomes a week. All of a sudden a week, to 10 days out of your training schedule, it can start setting you back. There needs to be progression in your training, right? This is how we get better. This is how we get faster. This is how we get stronger. So if you are missing out on sessions and you're not following a steady rate of progression, you're not going to be as conditioned as what you could be come race day. So 2-day rule is the rule that I follow. It's the rule that I get a lot of my clients to obviously adhere to as well, is just never let it go by more than 48 hours.